So I just got back from New York City, Greg. And we stayed on Bowery Street, at Chinatown.
Okay.
The oldest street in New York City. And so I walked the length of this street maybe a couple of times. I like to walk New York City, even if it's like an hour walk. There's just lots to see, and
Yep.
I like a sort of.
It's a great walking city.
Yeah, sort of slow. Even though it's massive, it is a good walking city. Just because how big it is and how dense it is, you just go through many neighborhoods. But they have these signs in the store windows, and maybe years from now they'll have plaques, but talking about the history of the neighborhood and maybe that address. So, I took a couple of photos, and there was a photo of the Ramones on one of these posters. And so I zoomed in, as I'm walking away, I zoomed in on it to see how sharp the photo was. And it said the Ramones standing in front of CBGB's on Bowery Street. And I go, well, I've heard of CBGB's.
Good for you.
Yeah, good for me. I've heard about the Ramones on CBGB's, and you just heard about all this, rock and roll stuff happening at this club. So I searched it, and lo and behold, it's on my walk. So got to go inside the former CBGB's. It's now a fashion store, very high-end rock and roll fashion.
Okay.
So if you think of the outfits that a rock and roll lead singer might have, I saw the stuff and I immediately thought of Lenny Kravitz and sort of, his fashion sense. And I say, yeah, he probably inspired this, or maybe he shops here. And so that was really neat to go in. I think they had some of the original wall of CBGB. So they had a lot of these stickers throughout the wall. They had a lot of the designer, John, what's his name? John Varvatos, I think, had a lot of these gold records framed on walls given to him by record companies when so-and-so band reaches like 1 million units sold and whatnot. So there's a lot of that stuff, a lot of instruments. They even sold music out of there, some vinyl. So that was very interesting.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And I thought it's interesting because of who we have on our show today.
Yes.
Mark Howard is coming back on the show. Uber producer and engineer. Mark Howard, to talk about his newest book, which is really a photo album of the various studios that he's put together for bands over the past, 40, 50 years. So we're going to have him on. So it was really interesting being in that place. It was amazing going into the Bowery Ballroom, which I guess if I were to, people in Toronto where we record this, we're thinking about, local venues. Maybe it's like the Danforth Music Hall. But just a great little venue. Saw the Sheepdogs there.
Is that where you saw them?
Yeah. And they just blew me away.
Was it part of what you were there for, or did they happen to be playing there and you went and saw them?
They just happened to be playing there. And both of these places, CBGB's and the Bowery Ballroom, were literally no more than 10 minutes from where I was staying. Nice. So,
Sheepdogs always put on a good show. I've seen them. I saw them do an album release party at, can't remember, it was a country bar that actually became Jasper Dandy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I can't remember what the name of it was before Jasper Dandy, but I saw them there for a record release party. And then I remember seeing them. It was a school night, literally, for Cal, a school night.
Yeah.
And it was during the Junos, can't remember how many years ago. And it was at the Horseshoe, and it was the Junos party. And think the show started at 1 a.m. or midnight, something like that. And so it was like a very late school night for Kelly.
Back in the
Uh,
days when we could stay up that late.
yeah, yeah. That was a great show. And another fun time I remember, which was in New York City actually, was I was there on business. I believe either Josie saw that I was in New York or Kelly saw that Joel was in New York,
Yeah.
and they conspired to make sure that we met up. And so I texted Joel because I didn't realize he was in New York too at the same time, being Joel Carrier from Dine Alone, who has represented the Sheepdogs, or does represent the Sheepdogs, I believe, still on the label. So anyway, we ended up. I took Lara, who was but our social media person for Flight Center in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I took her to this after party with the Sheepdogs in New York with Joel. And the funny thing is, all she could all she could continue to say over and over again, and it was after a few drinks, I have to admit that, she kept calling them, and this is why I texted you this when you were at the show.
Yeah.
She just kept calling them the tall Jesuses.
The tall Jesus.
So
except
to this
for,
day,
except for
10
one
years
guy.
later, but generally speaking, right?
Yeah, the tall
So
dudes.
yeah, so to this day, they have always been known as the tall Jesuses. And when I've seen them again, I always text Jers, as we call her, Lara, to say I've seen the tall Jesuses tonight.
They're amazing. I would not hesitate to see them over and over and over again.
Yep, they put on a good show.
They're just really, really, really good.
Yep.
Listen, before Mark comes on, and I think we've talked about this in passing over the past couple of episodes. And I'll preface it with this: we've always said, or we have said, I guess since this podcast started, that the way musicians are going to make their money is not through streaming, obviously, is live shows. But now we're coming to the point where musicians, bands are finding it difficult to even make live shows work.
Mm-hmm.
And friend of the show and past guest Alan Cross has written about this. There's a variety of factors, but really there's not, with the rising costs of everything globally right now, the rise in fuel costs, which impacts everything. It's now hard for bands to finish a tour in places like the Danforth Music Hall and the Bowery Ballroom and come home and see that they've actually made money from such a tour. I think big legacy acts may not have that problem. I don't think people, if you're selling out the Air Canada Centre or the Scotiabank Arena, you're probably not having that problem. But everyone else, if you're not that type of act,
is having a challenge right now.
How are you now?
It's not getting better, and there's a fear, and it's not an original thought. I'm trying to remember what band posted it.
There's been a couple. There's Garbage has talked about
Garbage. Thank you.
Yeah,
so it's like the fear is we could lose an entire generation of music, like not just pop and whatever, but like an entire generation of new creative artists, musicians. Yeah, it's and
I want to talk to Mark about this. I want to talk to him about the venues that he's recorded music in, and is that viable anymore? And we'll ask him a little bit about that. Anyways,
former guest. Yeah. I was going to say too, former guest from Flyer Vault. Also, or was part of a segment, I believe, on Global News.
Yeah.
About Lee's Palace. That was really interesting. So if anybody gets a chance to go check that out on the Flyer Vault on Instagram, it's a good article. He's got a link out to the Global article, and it's all about just making sure that venues like Lee's Palace get all the help they can get from the city so that they can continue to thrive or exist.
Yeah, and that we figure out collectively as an industry how artists and talent can continue to get paid.
Yep.
Let's move forward with our chat with Mark Howard.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
I'm Mark Howard, and I'm a record producer, a mixer, and a recordist. And so I consider myself as a guerrilla recorder. I don't use any of the normal ways that people do make recordings. So that's who I am, and I like to welcome to the music.
Perfect.
Right.
Welcome, Mark. I'm so excited to have you back on. I remember when we got together. It was pre-COVID, so I don't know when 2018, something like that. I think
Way back then.
Somewhere around then we got together last. I remember you telling stories about recordings, sessions, and studios, and me being the ex-musician, I remember just totally geeking out and having goosebumps listening to it. So, with the new book, Recording Icons, Creative Spaces, it was so amazing to think back to the conversation that we had. And if anybody's listening to this, please go back and listen to that, because we dive quite deep into topics. But it just, again, I've got goosebumps again now seeing the pictures from those sessions. It's just amazing. I was blown away when I went through it. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are you right now, Mark?
I am in my friend's attic in New Orleans, and I'm just kind of gathering up some gear. And I've rented a house in Bayou St. John, and I'm ready to start a record in a couple of days with this woman, Shannon Williams.
So you're still checking out homes and mansions and spaces, and you're still doing that. I wanted to ask you about that. Today we're hearing about artists, like Billie Eilish, for example, recording full albums in her bedroom using a laptop, using Pro Tools. You talked earlier, I think just before we started recording, you like to do things different. You're a quote unquote, guerrilla recordist.
Yeah.
Why are you still making music the way you do?
I think that I'm very attracted to working in new spaces, and a lot of my work is based off of accidental recording. I'll have like a microphone that's in a hallway and that I recorded a guitar with, but then I'd be recording something else, and that records the hallway with the sound coming down the hall. And so that becomes the reverb to the track, and things that are not conventional happen in situations where if I'm in a recording studio, it's just kind of like drums go here, this is the reverb. So there's less chance of kind of creating accidents, So I'm always interested in new sounds and trying to make new sounds and being limited to sounds. It's if I go in and I don't have any reverb, I'll create a reverb, or I'll if I don't have a shaker, I'll get a wooden box and put stones in it and make it so just kind of unconventional stuff usually comes out in these mixes, that like strange kind of brews. And so I think it's been kind of like a highlight of my work that I've always got like stranger sounds going on.
After the success, Mark, of your first book, Listen Up.
Yeah.
How did this second book come to be?
Well, I've been kind of taking photos and collecting photos for the last 30 years. And, I've always had photos on my laptop, and I'll always show, oh, this is Robert Plant and this is the house where we did it. And then after a while, people are like, dude, you got to make a book. This is incredible. Like, you have so many photos. And so a friend of mine, Misha from New Orleans here, he says, you got to put out a book of all these. This is crazy. And so I started to kind of like, I've got so many, it's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
I kind of like, I built a book myself, and then I just kind of posted it on, on Instagram, and the guy that picked up my last book, he saw it. He goes, I want that book. And so, all right, you can put this book out too. So,
Oh, wow. So you just sort of made it for yourself, and
yeah, I just kind of, I did a big format one where that's kind of, I'm a big fan of like Helmut Newton and these kind of like photographers, and they have like beautiful books and they're like big. And so I wanted mine to be like that. And so I took all my favorite photos and I kind of put them in categories with the places that I recorded them, the inside, interior design, kind of everything I did, and then with the artists making the records in these environments and stuff like that. So yeah, so it was kind of like not accidental, but I always wanted to do it, and so it happened, and it happened pretty quickly. So
wow.
yeah.
How did you like? I'm sure you have a huge amount of photographs and stuff. So, how did you decide what went into the book? And B, and the follow-up question that I wanted to know is, like, did you have to vet the photos with the artists or representation, or were you just able to do what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was able to kind of do what I wanted to do, and being able to, have these photos available, and then it was difficult to pick. I have so many, so I just went with like the most impressive. It's like the photo that's on the cover. It's like this house in Malibu that looks over the ocean. It's got like a 3-story high window, and it was like pretty amazing. It was called Raven's Eye.
Oh, is that with the wooden
Yeah, the
framing? Yeah.
wooden frame, but massive window, and
Stunning.
so I made a record in there. It was incredible, and it's architecturally amazing, the architect and all that stuff. So I've always kind of fell into these crazy environments, and it's like I had a place in Silver Lake in Los Angeles, and it was like a 1920s movie star estate, 22 bedrooms with a Olympic-sized pool, marble line. And I met the woman that owned it, and I said, love to make some records here. And she goes, I'd love that too. And so, so you never know what's going on. Like,
Yeah, man.
you don't ask, you don't know. So so it's been quite a voyage. And so I do a thing called time-lapse photography, and with that, I'm able to capture these artists in their natural habitat singing, without them kind of like feeling like they're being filmed or shot, so it's because the camera's just taking a picture every 30 seconds or so. And so I've got beautiful photos in the book of Neil Young singing, Robert Plant like concentrating on writing down his lyrics, and Bob Dylan kind of like just be kind of hanging out listening to the playbacks, and so all kinds of different scenes going on in the studio that a lot of people have no clue what's going on in there. So I'm kind of like, showing them, here we are. This is where we made the record. These are the people I made the record with, and these are the kind of things that happened around it. And so, like when I was in Hawaii, I took some really cool photos of like this surfboard fence that went all the way around this church, and this reverend had given me this church. It was a surf church, and he let us work during the week. And so not only is it the environment, I take like the where I am in the world,
Yeah.
the surroundings and stuff, but to give you an idea of what it was like to be there and to work in these places, and what's outside of the church and stuff like that. So Or
That was fantastic. It was again, it's an amazing book. So.
Mark, did you have to make a deal with the pastor that you got to use the church Monday to Saturday, but on Sunday, did you have to attend church? Was that part of the
that
deal?
was the deal. That was the deal.
Really?
I had to show up for his Sunday kind of thing service that he put on. So,
Yeah.
but it was cool, and he was a really great guy, and it was a bunch of surfers there, and it was kind of it didn't feel like you're being pressured to or whatever. It was just kind of a fun thing, and he just talked regular, and
Cool.
it was pretty cool. I also did. I was in Tahiti, and I was recording these Tahitian choirs, and
Okay.
so I had met this guy who was the pastor of this Tahitian choir church, and he looked like Jesus. He didn't speak any English; he's only Latin, and so he welcomed me into the church. It was just like to record his choir. It was pretty amazing.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's
Listen,
awesome.
Mark, take us, behind the scenes. There's a lot of people that listen to this podcast because they're fans of music. And I think, your previous episode and this episode is going to be a delight to them because it's almost like inside baseball, right? It's like behind the scenes.
Mm.
So one of the things I'm really curious about, Gregg and I were sort of alluding to it, that the music industry has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if record companies do they still have budgets for, so I like that people listening will not have seen the face that you made. But tell me, what are record companies saying when you go to them? It's okay, I'm taking your artist, we're going, like Sam Roberts, we're going down to Australia and we're going to make music, and the record company says, "Nah, you're not. You're gonna be smoking weed and surfing." Like,
Yeah.
Tell me about today. What's happening in music?
Well, we got a whiff of it, kind of like at the kind of the end of the Neil Young record that we made, and
Lanois.
it was called Lanois.
Yeah.
And so it was the name is based off of a joke between Daniel Lanois and Neil, because Daniel would always say people pronounce his last name wrong and they call him Lanois, and so Neil just started calling him Lanois, and then it turned into Lanois, and then so we that record took a long time to make because Neil only works 3 days before the full moon, so we had to wait for every full moon to come back and record a couple more songs, and so it took 6 months to make this record.
That's nuts.
And it was meant to be only a acoustic record, and it was it's just Neil by himself on that record, but it sounds like a huge kind of like band almost, the way it was all treated. But there's some beautiful acoustic tracks. But at the end of it, it was 6 months, and then we had to hand in a bill, and it came to like $250,000, and then the managers turned around and said, $250,000. This is an acoustic record. Warner Brothers only pays $25,000 for acoustic records or whatever. And so it was shocking that, what it should have cost, we only got quarter of what he wanted or whatever. So it was eye-opening thinking, oh shit, if Neil Young's the biggest guy on the planet and they don't got money to make records with him, then this could be the end of an era,
Yeah.
So it's really bizarre.
So how is it now? Are you still having these discussions?
I'm working for a lot less money for sure, but I have a way that I can still make money because I do it through I rent Airbnb houses and everybody can stay in them, and they're cheap. It's like, if you were to rent the cheapest studio in LA, maybe with a good console and stuff, it's probably going to be $500-$600 a day. You can get an Airbnb with 6 bedrooms for a lot less than that. Everybody can live there, and you make the record in the house, and it's like half of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
Oh.
yeah. So I'm able to kind of like still make money and still travel the world. So
And I
Yeah.
remember when we got together last time, you also talked about the gear you bring in, like doing it in that type of like Airbnb or rental place.
yeah.
You've got a nimble. I remember you referring to it sort of like a more nimble setup than necessarily this huge monstrous board
Yeah.
in a studio with
Exactly.
all the
Yeah.
sound rooms and everything.
Yeah. These days it's I'm down to like 3 road cases that I fly with. And like here I'll borrow a set of speakers and mic stands and cables because that stuff's too heavy to travel with. So everywhere I go, I just kind of like I'll just borrow that stuff. And I started off in like a transport trailer. The tape recorder was the size of a refrigerator. The console were as long as the couch. I had rugs and lamps and couches, and it was like crazy big, and it was only me, and I was doing all that by myself. And I had made record with Tom Waits, and I'd backed up the truck to the schoolhouse where we were working, and I was by myself, and he was the only guy that's ever helped me unload the truck before. So
Wow.
it was kind of cool, So
That's awesome.
yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah.
A lot of these places, you tell the story, and it's like you're on your motorcycle riding down California or riding down somewhere. You're finding all these things on your bike. Tell me about, we did a pre-show just before you came on, and Gregg and I were talking about New York City, and I was just there and visited the Bowery Ballroom and the old CBGBs, and I talked to him about when you walk New York City, you've got the opportunity to go through so many different types of neighborhoods. So I'm curious, is there something similar as you're on your bike, being in the air, and finding these places?
It is kind of an interesting way to do it, but it's again, I'm just taking a ride and bumping into these places. I was riding up the coast of up the PCH, and I happened to come past Malibu, and then it goes all flat as you go into Oxnard. And so I pulled through this little Mexican town, and suddenly there's this theater for rent. I think that could be an interesting place to make a record. And so I, phoned the number on the board and ended up renting this place for like $1,500 a month. And I got to do whatever I wanted with it. And so I took all the seats out, but built a big deck in the middle, and it became like a home for like 5 years for making a lot of records, with Willie Nelson, and I finished Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind record there, and worked with the Chili Peppers there, and Marianne Faithfull's record I produced there. And so it was like a really great kind of like place for well-known musicians to go without anybody bothering them, because it was like a little Mexican little village.
Yeah, was this the Teatro Studio, right?
Teatro Studio, yeah.
Teatro Studio.
Yeah.
Which was a former porn house? Is that right?
An old Mexican porno cinema. But it was kind of like light porn. It was like there's like kind of like a joke, not joke, but there's humor in it, and it's like just mostly topless and stuff like that. So it wasn't like raunchy porn or anything like that. But there was like the main guy. His name was El Macho, and
of course it was.
yeah. And so I found all of these posters that were like, all the movies that had played there, and they were in all these boxes, and some of them were big posters, and some of them were just those like little ones with the photographs on them that you put outside the theater. You can see what the scenes were and who was in the movie, kind of thing. And so when we were making Dylan's Time Out of Mind record, I was telling him about it. He goes, "Where are they?" I said, "They're upstairs." And he said, "Can you show them to me?" I said, "Yeah." So up there, he's on his hands and knees going through all these posters, picking them out, because he wanted to use them for like promo for certain shows and stuff like that. So they would take El Macho out and put Bob Dylan. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. In that studio, I think you left a couple rows of seats. Or
Yeah.
was that
In the back. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, was that on
Yeah.
purpose for listening, or was that just
No.
people hanging out, or what?
Well, it wasn't, yeah, it was meant to be for people to just kind of like, you could sit there if they were
Yeah.
and hang out. But it ended up turning to be the seats in the back turned out to be guitar stands.
For the guitar.
We had like all these amazing guitars all lined up, basses, and then the front part of the cinema, we left 50 seats down there because there was a stage. So if we wanted to do performances and have people come in, or that way we could kind of use the stage. And the big silver screen was still there, and I'd gotten 16 millimeter projectors, and I had all these different movies from all different places, and I had a little remote from Home Depot that you could turn your lights on and off on. So I would put those boxes on the projector, and I could turn multiple projectors on just by clicking the buttons. And so I had this one movie. It was like a driver's educational movie of a car driving through the streets of Miami, like the driver's perspective.
Mhm.
And then I had these old black and white movies of like Russian films of like the sky's face, and so car would be driving, and then it would be superimposed over that. This faces would come out of the road, and it was just like it was very psychedelic. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I've been watching for the longest time, ever since I got Netflix and Prime, all of these, movies and documentaries about music and different venues and such. Like a lot of these places that you've been in, Mark, talking about the Teatro Studio, I'm sure there's tons of. They should make a movie out of some of these places or some of these experiences that you've had in some of these locations.
Working on it.
All right.
Oh, good.
Some guys out of New York, they're really pushing to do this kind of docudrama with me. So it'd be the same kind of thing, me riding around my bike, discovering these places, and bringing people in, and it'd be really cool to see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That is nice. So, how many years was that particular location, Mark?
The Teatro was 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I'd done 5 years at a place called the Paramore. That was a movie star estate. And then I did 5 years here in New Orleans at a place that was called Kingsway, an old kind of like a huge kind of like mansion in the French Quarter. And so that's where we made a bunch of records there too. So
yeah, there's a lot of
three that we kind of like had long 5-year stints.
Yeah.
But after that, it's just me. I just kind of go in, make a record, and get out of there, and kind of go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Was that purposely, like not purposely, but like was 5 years sort of the run the place would have? Because it's interesting, you did move around a fair bit from place to place.
Yeah. It's it kind of my last stop was the Paramore, and so Tom Waits was the last one that I had brought through there. And so he didn't want to work there all the time. So I pulled out of the Paramore and then went to Northern California, and there was a schoolhouse at the end of his kind of road. And so it was easy for him to just get up and come over to the schoolhouse, and we can make a record that way. So, and then after that, I didn't ever go back to the Paramore. I went to Australia for almost a year with Sam Roberts, and made a couple other records while I was there. And it's really beautiful in Australia. It was hard for me to come home.
I can imagine. Was there a particular sound or vibe that before we leave the Teatro Studio, was there something in that studio that when you listen to records that were made there that you could point out and say that sound was because of this hallway or this room? Or
they all have those little tiny things built in. Like New Orleans there was always like a pool cue hit. You could always hear like somebody playing pool in another room on some of the songs. And then Teatro had this sound that was kind of like open air. Everything would just sounded like it had air around it. It was really a magical place because it had like 3-story high ceilings and all the curtains were along around it. So it was like you could have a stand-up bass player playing bass next to a drummer, and you could solo the bass, and you wouldn't even hear the drums because it was so dense. And so it's like this tightness that you can't really get anywhere else. And so so there's definitely and then in New Orleans, we were making a record with the Neville Brothers, and there's like these cicada bugs outside, and we'd have the windows open, and you would hear them kind of come up, and I was working there with Brian Eno had come in to do some to help on the record, and so he showed up. He's like the master of this keyboard called the DX7, and so he's kind of like pre-programmed it, and so he's got all these really kind of ambient sounds, but he's got like real strange sounds in it too. So he had this one sound, it was an insect sound, and he would play this melody on the insect sound, and then the bugs outside would repeat his melody.
Get
and
out.
I'd say, play something different because that's too weird. And then he plays another piece, and then they would follow him again. So he was communicating with insects. It was really strange.
Wow.
That is so
That's
neat.
awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
you reminded me, Greg and I watch this YouTube channel by Rick Beato. I don't know if you know who Rick Beato is. Check him out if you have, whenever you have time. And you know, sometimes he'll talk about today's music is quote unquote too perfect.
Yeah.
There's none of these. You know, you talked about the pool table in the back or the billiards, and you can hear the cue hitting the ball. And today, you know, a producer or engineer or mixer would like remove that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on sort of these, you know, I don't know if ambient sound is the right word for it, but sort of these background noises that fill that space?
Yeah, I feel like they contribute to it because it's like you feel like you're in that kind of location, you know, like with those bugs only sound like that here. And you know, in England, Brian Eno would have like birds outside, and that you could feel like it's English countryside, you know. So there's all different sounds that kind of happen that feel unique to those kind of recordings that happen, and I leave it all in. I kind of like love leakage and use it to my benefit. So
Yeah.
where every other kind of studio or producer, they want everything so isolated and dead, so that way I don't know, so that they could, you know, move stuff around maybe. But I love the fact that like if the singer sings the wrong words and then redoes it, and then you hear this ghost in the background of them, you could never recreate that, you know. So it's most people would try to get rid of it, and I would kind of keep it. It's a stranger brew, you know.
Yeah, there's something to be said about even, you know, musicians playing the wrong note.
Yeah.
That's, you know, gives the song or the recording like personality,
Yeah.
you know?
I remember watching oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It's, you know, like it's nice to have like a blue note in there that, you know, just kind of like, it's nice. But if it's completely the wrong note or something,
Of course.
and it has to be repaired. And so everything else is easily repaired, you know, because it's, you know, it masks kind of like a Band-Aid that you stick over it, and so you don't hear it, you know. It will maybe leak into the vocal mic, and you might get this like weird kind of thing kind of going on, but it's
Yeah.
you can work around it easy.
Yeah. What I was gonna say was, it reminds me of, I remember watching, I think it's VH1 or one of the, anyway, I mean, it could be MTV, but had Behind the Record, and it talks to the engineers and the producers about certain albums, and it was with Butch Vig talking about Nevermind. And I remember I made my 20-something year, well, he was probably in his late teens at the time. I made him sit down and watch it with me, and just the amount of not the amount of mistakes, but the Butch embraced those mistakes. And, you know, Kurt would get upset about, you know, doing a vocal track over another vocal track like he talked about. And he you know, one of the comments he made was, well, Paul McCartney did that. And I guess Kurt went off, went, fine then, you know, kind of thing. But it was just like, it was amazing how Butch built the built those mistakes into the album.
Yeah. Like now listening back to that record, it's really incredible because like the drum sounds are so super clean on it, and it's like, and then it's just the distorted guitar, and so and the same thing with like listening to like Pink Floyd records. Now you listen back, you think, wow, they must have been using all these effects. It's actually they're not using very much, and no reverbs or anything. It's just about their arrangements and stuff like that, and how they pick certain instruments to be played like that. So it's really cool to look back at these records and see how they are made, you know. So
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Talk to me about finding the Kingsway studio. What sort of venue was that, and how did you come about it?
Well, it's like I got invited. I was living in Canada. I was like 21. I got invited to come down to New Orleans to make a record with the Neville Brothers,
That's right.
and the Neville Brothers had recorded 2 songs on the record of Bob Dylan's, and Bob Dylan just happened to be in town, and so he invited us to the show, and so we said, yeah, the Neville Brothers did 2 of your songs, and he said, what's that like? And so we invited him back to the studio, and so that turned into a Bob Dylan record after he heard
Oh wow.
Eric and got on our side. You know, like it was, incredible. And so that was supposed to be the end of our New Orleans time after we made the Oh Mercy record with Bob, and then this house came up, and I was walking through the French Quarter with this woman that we knew, and I said, "That's a really cool place. That'd be a great place to make some records." And she goes, "I know how to get in there." I'm like, it takes me around the backyard, and we climb this fence, and we go in there, and there's a security guard in there. She's like, "Teddy, come on over." And like so we go in this house, and it's just dilapidated. It's like 20 years of rain coming through broken ceilings and dripped. It was just like a haunted place, and cockroaches. It was just like disgusting. And so I told Daniel Lamois about it. I said, it's cool, but it's too far gone. Let's get out of here. We were about to go to Mexico and start making records down there, and ended up this woman convinced him to buy it.
Wow.
It was a super big, huge house, probably about 15 bedrooms and big, huge parlor room, and so he ended up buying it, and I had to again kind of change my course, and I became a renovator and next thing I know, I'm putting roofs on this house, shingles, and it's and so yeah, so that's kind of like how it turned into Kingsway, that. And it was only meant to be like a home studio, like just for private records for us to make, with the artists that we were working with. And then at one point, we kind of moved away from there and ended up on the West Coast. And then we opened the doors to other musicians that came through. Blind Melon had come through, and I'd made 2 records with REM in there. And so, yeah, so it was kind of like a private thing, and then the doors open for other musicians to come in and make some cool records. So yeah, it was.
How was it making music with REM?
It was pretty cool because I helped them on Automatic for People. They came in, and I think it was Scott Litt, who was their producer, and so I was kind of more or less just kind of helping out and guiding them through it and all that stuff to get the studio working. So it's like a big, huge open room, and there's no isolation, and so they weren't used to that. They're like coming from LA. They're looking, so they're getting moving blankets and covering everything up, and ruining the sound. I thought it was, and so that record had passed and came out, and then they invited me to come work with them, me by myself, and so I had them kind of like no headphones, having the speakers really loud, playing to the speakers, and Michael was laying on the couch and singing, and I go over and give him a Shure 58 mic, and he goes, "I can sing while I'm laying on the couch." I said, "Yeah, you lay on the floor, do whatever you want." So the freedom that I kind of gave them, they really appreciated, and so I think that kind of like and again, working with kind of sounds where we had like I think it was a Mesa Boogie or some kind of like modern amp, but it had this crazy tremolo. And I said, let's just kind of plug the bass into it to see what it sounds like. And so that was like one of the sounds that was on Monsters, where the bass is going through a tremolo amp, and it was got this kind of really cool sound. And so those kind of accidents, and so they liked experimenting, where I think they made all their other records were very clinically made and maybe not as enjoyable as everybody playing at the same time and not having to wear headphones, make it more kind of organic. Yeah.
Is there a favorite location, favorite studio that you have?
I would say the Teatro was like the pinnacle of greatness. You know, it sounded incredible. It was a great place to work. There's a piano, an organ, drums, everything's all set up. You go over to play the piano, I'm recording you. There's no setup. You know, it was a musical playground. You go over to the vibraphones, bang, it's all ready to go. Like we're in studios, it's like, oh, I have this idea, I want to try this. Well, you can try it right away. Where in a normal studio, you got to bring out the mics and set it all up, and by then you've lost your inspiration. And so it was pretty cool. And I had a rear PA system in the back, and so I would play the track really loud, like if it was a concert, and then Edge would play his guitar through like this Vox amp, and it was super loud. And so you respond to sound pressure when it's loud, and the kick drum punch you in the stomach, and it just makes you kind of like feel like you're at a show. Where if you're in headphones and you're in a booth and it's cold, and you're just like you're not getting the satisfaction out of the headphones, and how can you be inspired like that? You know, you have to be kind of pressure punched by like large sound. And so I've just made it my thing that I just have a great playback system. So once the band's cut it, they come back and I play it back, and it's larger than life, and that's impresses them quite a bit. And then they feel good about themselves, you know, because like, wow, that sounds incredible. We're great.
Nice. As you're telling the story, I'm reminded of that album that the Rolling Stones made, XL on Main Street, and I think I watched the documentary of the making of that, and it was just, you know, they're in a home, they're in a mansion with a pool in the back, and
yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, people coming in and out.
Yeah.
Is there a place that got away? Was there a place that you wanted to make music in that you just never had the chance to?
I'm still kind of searching, you know, for places, but I want to make a record in Miami at Versace's mansion villa there, and it's got like this huge pool and a atrium, and I thought that would make a really cool recording. So I was thinking maybe I could do something maybe with Iggy Pop there, seeing as though he lives in Miami. And so there's that, and then there's, you know, maybe a castle or two, you know, in south of France, or just, you know, something that would be, you know, to top it all off, you know.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I've recorded in castles in Russia, and
okay,
I had like a church beside it, and we ended up making the record in the church. But it was the thing about castles, they're cold. So it's like, even in the summer, if you're there, it's freezing cold. And so, yeah, so it's not, it can be a little bit not as comfortable as you think it would be. So
yeah. That being said, is there a location that you were at, maybe a one-off, or maybe not, maybe you did a bunch of stuff there that the artist just, like, maybe it's the castle story, but that the artist just didn't like for whatever reason?
I haven't really found that problem yet. I haven't found an artist that didn't like where we were recording.
Yeah.
So every studio I kind of like make for that person. And so, you know, whether it's psychedelic and I got like lots of kind of like tapestries, or if it's modern, like the one in Malibu, got really cool furniture, and you just kind of feel comfortable in that way. But yeah, it's kind of like, depending on what the person likes. They want to be in the country, they want to be, you know, I asked them like, where do you want to work? And so I try to, you know, like with Sam Roberts, it was like this whole thing is like, well, it's, you know, January, we're in Montreal, and I want to surf. And I said, well, the only place in the planet you can surf where they speak English is in Australia. I said my friend lives in Byron Bay. We can go there, and I rented this big church that was a Airbnb, and everybody stayed there, and we recorded in the main church room, and it was incredible, except for the insects and the spiders that were the size of my hand, and the snakes. And there was like this. They have, instead of kangaroo, it's like a little kangaroo, and they call them joeys. And so the little joey would come to the back door, open the door, hop in, open the fridge, take some fruit out of there, and hop back out. It was like, as long as you didn't approach him, he was comfortable just to come in the house and help himself.
That's hilarious.
That's
like,
awesome.
But then there was the toilet, and so right behind the toilet was a funnel web spider. So you had to get in there and get out, do your business pretty quick. So, but he never, as long as you don't poke at it, it's not going to jump on you or anything.
Oh, wow.
Most dangerous spiders in the world,
Yeah. No, and I spent a lot of time down in Australia, and so the huntsmen I know you mentioned the huntsmen, the spiders, and they're like everything. They look scary. They're not, but they look scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of snakes. I'm okay with spiders, but I would go down and spend about 2 or 3 trips a year down there, and my bud's kids would always decorate the guest room up with the spiders and snakes before I arrived. So I always wanted to scare me. It was always a big thing. But it was funny because, to your point, we would literally be sitting there at the table outside on their patio where we ate, and there was a huntsman that was just hanging out in the light up above, and it was just there. I'm like, all right.
In one of the guys' bedrooms, and you just stayed there the whole time we were there.
Yeah.
Like, as long as you don't bother.
Yeah, exactly. Again, huntsmen are bad, but
yeah.
sorry?
Go ahead. Keep going.
I was going to say that actually one of the things that I wanted to touch on the book or to cover off that I really liked was, as much as you focused on, the Paramore, the Kingsway, and some of the main studios, I really like that you spent a section that just talked about like different studios you built around the world, like you talked about with Sam Roberts, Morocco. Like, it must be amazing to have this opportunity to be able to go and do that in various locations. Yeah,
and it's like you get to live in these locations, and it's you get to eat the food that the people eat there. It's like, and it's like if you're going on vacation, you stay at a all-inclusive hotel and eat hamburgers and stuff like that, but you never get to taste the cuisine of Morocco, or because but by doing it this way, you have somebody that's a cook from there, and they cook your food, and you get to taste what it really tastes like. And like when you go to Italy, it's like nothing like American pizza or anything. It's a crazy thing. And so it's like you dive into this whole culture. So you're getting, that's leaking into what you're eating, is leaking into what you're playing, and it's like it becomes like a whole kind of like a thing where all these ingredients are in the record, And I made a record with this band from Canada called Tragically Hip. And
Heard of them?
Heard of them.
Yeah.
Heard of them? They were they wanted to make a record, but they wanted to perform their record live. So they every day we would do a live kind of takes of it. And so we were 2 weeks into it, and I didn't have any takes. What? And they were eating pizza and pasta and all these like foods that kind of drain you. And so I said, that's it. We're going to try barbecue. And I started feeding them red meat. We were getting like 5 takes in a row, and it was amazing. And so it's like, depending on, what was going on, like, sometimes it's the diet,
That's interesting.
A lot to do with, I would always say the food is the hardest part of making a record, It's like,
wow.
Like you don't want to just be, eating foods that are kind of draining to you. So,
that's really interesting.
Did you make those at their Kingston studio, or
no? It was in New Orleans. They came to New Orleans to that record.
Okay, yeah, I know they were down there. That's amazing.
Yeah,
I need to know more about Bella Vista.
Okay,
I'm a huge Neil Young fan.
Yeah.
So we know 3 days before a full moon, he would record. But tell me about the location.
It was it's right on the reservoir in Silver Lake in Los Angeles, and it kind of became like a workshop for a while for us, and that was me and Daniel Amois, and so we ended up he had been working by himself in his place. I hadn't worked with him for a long time, and then he invited me to come in to make a couple of records, and so I kind of like turned his house upside down, and he had the studio in the basement and it was like a cave, and I didn't like it very much. And he's got this beautiful, big, huge room with high ceiling. I just brought the Neve console upstairs and, decked it out with couches, and it was like really comfortable. So, and then we'd made a record, a solo record. Well, it was a band record called Black Dove. And so we had, this girl, Trixie Whitley, as the singer, and Dan's kind of like road band as his band. And so we discovered that if we filmed each take, and then that would be the record. So as we're performing it, that's the take you're seeing. It was like a one camera shot going around the room in black and white, and it was kind of cool. So every song on the record had these little videos that are little films that went with them. And so Elliot Roberts was Dan's manager at the time, and he ended up showing Neil Young these little kind of clips. He goes, "I want to do that," and so he ended up hooking up, and Neil came in, and that was the idea, is just to make like a beautiful acoustic record and film it. And then it turned into this like psychedelic kind of like I'm thinking like, how the hell am I going to better Neil Young's sound? Like, this is like incredible. And so I had this playback system with like double 18-inch subwoofers, and then a stack of like Dyna Audio speakers going too high, and the playback was unbelievable. So I'd recorded Neil playing this acoustic, and I had this sub-harmonizer effect that I put on his acoustic guitar. So every time he hit that low note, it was like a bass note, like boom, and his pant legs would shake, and a big smile would come on his face. It was like, wow, you like this, So, and it was weird the way this effect would only track on this Guild guitar, acoustic guitar. He had Hank, his guitar called Hank, that was Hank Williams acoustic, and it was a Gibson, but it didn't track to this certain effect that I was using on him. So we ended up using this beautiful old mahogany Guild acoustic guitar. And so the effect, every time he hit it, it was just like thunderous, And so we went from that, and he said, "Oh, I want to try the next song on my," he's got this Les Paul, like a 58 or 57 Les Paul gold top that he's painted black, and it's got like a what's called a Firebird pickup, which is a really hot pickup in the back. And he runs them into like these two twin amps, deluxes. And so he plays the guitar, and so I get everything up to ready to record him. But I accidentally left the sub sound on there. And so when I turned up the speakers, this guitar sounded like every window in the house started shaking, and it was like thunderous, and he was just like, wow. And so we discovered this kind of sound on him that he was so excited about. And so I had to go out on tour with him to teach his live guy how to get the sound live. So they rented out the Wiltern Cinema, and I got there, and they got like an acoustic style PA, and it's only got one sub aside. And so I told the live guy, his guy that's worked with him for since 1971, I said, "I need 16 subs aside to make this work." He goes, "It's an acoustic record. That's impossible." So I told Neil, I said, "I don't think they're going to go for it." And next day, there's my 16 subs. And so we took that on tour, and we just rocked every place we were in. It was pretty incredible. One guy with this huge sound. And so, when Hitchhiker came on, it was like, whoa, and so I jumped off the tour in Buffalo thinking that, the guys got it. And I got off the bus, I crossed the border, got back to Toronto. And sure enough, Neil calls me up. They were in Syracuse. He goes, he don't got it. Get on a plane, get over here right now. And so he sent the car, I jump in the car, private jet to the next gig. And so it was like I spent another week on the road with Neil, kind of like doing these really crazy subsonic shows for Illinois record. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So from his Desert Island Artist to mine, working with Dave Grohl, same studio, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So because it was just Neil by himself, we thought, oh, well, maybe it might be good to put drums on Walk With Me, one of the songs on the track. So we got Dave in, and it was his dream to, play with Neil Young. So that was kind of, and so, he came in and we cut a bunch of tracks, and we thought that might be like a big single, like, another one of those, like, tracks that Neil kind of does. But it didn't really go anywhere. It kind of fell flat. I don't know what happened. Maybe it didn't push right or whatever. But
I love that song.
Yeah, me too. It was
so good.
No brainer. I thought why isn't it there? It's like, Rockin' in the Free World had that same kind of thing, so it was pretty cool.
So there's a version of that song with drums?
Yes.
Oh.
But
Man.
Gotta find it. It's on the internet, I'm sure.
Is it really? Wow. Because it's not on the album, is it?
No, it's not on the album. This happened after, yeah.
Oh, wow. So Neil's like he's releasing all of these archive stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering if, like, would Neil own that or would that be Dave's?
I'm sure it's in there somewhere. I haven't noticed it yet, but I think.
Oh, man.
I can't believe I just dropped a Neil Young.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Note that he didn't know, because normally that doesn't happen.
Oh, right. My! I'm going to go on the message boards tonight and say there's a version of Walk With Me that Dave Grohl plays the drums on. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I can just imagine. None of these
we had to have this kid stand in front of the kick drum because we had like this big, huge, bombastic kick drum for him, and this kid had to stand there. It was so loud, and so because he was just kicking that kick drum so hard, it was like he was pushing it out of the way every time. So the drum sounds were pretty amazing too.
I can imagine. Wow,
that's awesome.
It was interesting. I went online and I typed in all of these studio names to see whether or not any of them are around anymore. Paramore Studio is like a boutique hotel. It's like a fancy upscale place right now. But I'm curious, have you ever returned to any of these locations?
No. Kingsway.
Okay.
This I did like a what do you call it? A soiree in there a couple of years ago. For Listen Up. And so it was during Jazz Fest, and so the guy that owns it now let me do a big party in there. That was about the only return that I've ever done. So I've never been back to the Paramore or the Teatro. That was there, that happened then, and now I'm off to somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. So, Mark, one of the questions we'd like to ask as we sort of wrap up our conversation is, what are you listening to lately that people should be checking out?
Well, it's always the same. Yeah, I get this question a lot, and the thing is, I'm only listening to the stuff I'm working on. So I just finished this really great record with this guy Max Gomez. Did it in this cool beach house in Marina Del Rey, and so it's hard to say with records that are out there these days. They're all kind of controlled by the younger kind of kids, and so I'm not necessarily that interested in what they're doing. Sometimes I'll hear something that makes me jealous, like I'll hear a bass line that on a Little Wayne record or something, played, like a boom, 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 and it's like a impressive sound. So it's just those kind of things, kind of like can be, and with me, it's either I hate it or it's great, and I still hate it because I wish I would have done it. So,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. Let's plug the book one more time. It's Recording Icons, Creative Spaces, the Creative World of Mark. There you go. There's the book right there. That's the home.
It's
Check out
fantastic. The pictures are
they're
unbelievable. The stories are fantastic. It's
published by our friends at ECW Press.
Yep. Great people. I love them. They take care of me. It's great.
Absolutely. And again, your first book was Listen Up.
Yep.
Another, just a fantastic book. These books sort of go together.
Yeah.
Like what one is, this one's sort of the story.
Yeah.
The stories.
Yeah. It kind of like pulls you in. I talk about like the night blooming jasmine walking through New Orleans and the swamp moss. And so you're creating these visions for you. And now with the new book, you get to see that. This
Absolutely.
is what we made the Neville Brothers. There's the swamp moss and the stuffed animals in the studio and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
Can't wait to get that.
Yeah.
I think you did a party for the release of your first book.
I did.
You did something.
It was a mixture of I had a bad bout of cancer and I made it through it. And so I had a party and the book was released. And so I had it in Hamilton, Ontario. So it was kind of like a book release and kind of like awareness kind of concert. And all the money went to Princess Margaret Hospital. And so there's a doctor there that saved my life. And
nice.
I feel like I wanted to give back. And I did another concert in Toronto. And I had Sam Roberts there and Sarah McLachlan.
Was that the shoe? Was that the shoe you did that? I think.
No, that was at what do you call it? What's that round? The concert hall there. I can't even remember the name of it. But yeah, it was like a magnificent night, and so I did a really great kind of thing for the hospital again. So and then COVID hit, and I was planning on doing like maybe a festival or something like that. And so but everything got all dried up, so that's my next adventure. Is I'm gonna maybe try to venture into like a festivals. And after going to festivals in Australia, they do it right there. It's like nobody else knows how to do a festival like them. And they got sky tents there. You can go lay down on pillows if you're tired, and there's like all these everything's covered, like so you don't get burned from the sun. And it's kind of a cool way to do a festival.
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask whether there'll be a party for the release of this particular book.
I'm trying to work it out right now. So I'll probably do another Los Angeles Grammy Museum release there. And then you like you said, you went to CBGB's and now it's a
fashion store.
Fashion store, yeah. So and that's Vervato.
John Vervato,
yeah. So I kind of know him through the Willie Nelson camps and stuff like that. So I was thinking, either doing something there for a listening party or like that. And then I've been poking up Abbey Road to see if I could do one there and the Beatles room and all that stuff. So yeah, awesome. So I'm trying to put it all together. Once it's released in November, then we'll have all these things locked down and
nice.
My little trip,
Awesome.
And I can correspond them along with records that I'm making in these places. So all my flights are all taken care of by the records that I'm making. So it works out perfect. So
you do it smart, Mark, for sure.
Yeah. These days you got it. There's no money there, and you gotta take advantage of where you're at that time. So
for sure. Well, listen, we're gonna have you back on when this documentary, or this movie comes out. We're looking forward to that. If you need 2 hacks in the movie, let us know.
Okay. Well, we need somebody to control the belly dancers. So there you go.
What if you need us to move gear?
You're
To
not
move
asking
furniture?
Karim to be a belly dancer, are you?
No.
Just checking.
Well, cool, guys. Thank you so much for making it easy on me, and it felt like we did a really nice kind of interview, and so I'd be excited to see how everybody else likes it.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
Mark.
Have yourself a great evening.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, cheers. Bye bye.